While others are racing through every new release on their streaming queues, some people return to the same shows and movies again and again. They know every line, every plot twist, every background detail. Most people assume this is just nostalgia or laziness, but psychology tells a very different story. What if rewatching isn't about avoiding the new, but about something far more sophisticated happening in the brain? Psychology and neuroscience reveal that repeat viewers aren't stuck in the past. They're engaging in a complex form of emotional regulation and cognitive processing that most people never recognize. In this video, you'll discover what rewatching the same content actually says about intelligence, emotional depth, and mental resilience. Stay till the end. The last insight reveals why this habit might be one of the healthiest things you can do for your brain. When someone rewatches familiar content, their brain isn't seeking novelty, it's seeking control. Research in behavioral psychology shows that predictable narratives create what neuroscientists call a safe uncertainty zone. The viewer knows the outcome, but the emotional journey still activates reward pathways without triggering stress responses. Here's what's fascinating. In a world full of unpredictability and chaos, the brain craves moments where it knows exactly what's coming next. This isn't escapism, it's strategic emotional regulation. If you find yourself returning to the same shows during stressful periods, it actually shows high emotional intelligence. Your brain has identified a reliable tool for managing anxiety without numbing out completely. But there's something even deeper happening beneath the surface. Psychology reveals that familiar content requires less cognitive load to process. When watching something new, the brain works overtime tracking characters, following plot threads, interpreting new visual information. With rewatched content, this processing becomes automatic, freeing up mental resources for something more valuable, deeper emotional processing and reflection. Studies indicate that people who rewatch aren't being lazy, they're being efficient. The reduced cognitive demand allows the mind to notice subtleties missed the first time, to process themes more deeply, to sit with emotions rather than racing to keep up with plot. This is why certain scenes hit differently on the 3rd or 10th viewing. The brain finally has space to truly feel them. Neuroscience shows that the brain doesn't distinguish sharply between fictional relationships and real ones. When someone rewatches their favorite show, they're not just watching characters, they're reconnecting with relationships that activate the same neural pathways as real friendships. The Office, Friends, or Breaking Bad characters become genuinely familiar companions. This isn't parasocial in a negative way. Research on social cognition reveals that these fictional connections can fulfill genuine psychological needs for belonging and connection, especially during periods of isolation or transition. If you feel comforted by returning to certain fictional worlds, it actually demonstrates your brain's sophisticated ability to source emotional support from multiple channels, not just direct human interaction. Most people miss this, but it's a sign of adaptive coping. And here's where it gets really interesting. Psychology reveals something profound. Rewatching content from specific life periods helps consolidate autobiographical memory. The shows you watched during college, after a breakup, or during a major life transition become anchored to your identity development during those times. When you rewatch them, you're not just experiencing the show, you're revisiting who you were, measuring growth, reconnecting with past versions of yourself. Behavioral psychology calls this temporal landmark thinking. The brain uses these cultural touchstones as markers for personal history. It's similar to how a song can transport you back to a specific moment, except more sustained and narrative-rich. If you regularly return to certain shows from your past, it shows emotional continuity, the ability to integrate past and present selves into a coherent identity narrative. Here's something that might surprise you. People who rewatch often display higher pattern recognition abilities. With each viewing, the brain picks up on details previously overlooked: foreshadowing, visual motifs, thematic parallels, subtle character development. Studies in cognitive psychology show that this layered consumption actually trains the brain to think in more complex, interconnected ways. First viewing, plot. Second viewing, character psychology. Third viewing, directorial choices and deeper themes. This isn't repetition, it's iterative deepening. Critics might call it obsessive, but research suggests it's actually a marker of analytical thinking and intellectual curiosity. The ability to find new meaning in familiar material demonstrates cognitive flexibility, not rigidity. But perhaps the most powerful reason lies in how the brain processes emotion. Psychology reveals that rewatching allows for what therapists call emotional rehearsal. When you know a sad scene is coming, your brain prepares differently than during a first viewing. This preparation doesn't diminish the emotion, it creates a controlled environment for processing difficult feelings. Research on emotional regulation shows that repeated exposure to manageable emotional stimuli like a character death you've processed before helps build resilience. It's similar to exposure therapy but self-directed. The brain learns it can handle intense emotions, recover, and integrate the experience. If you find yourself rewatching emotionally heavy content, it might actually show psychological sophistication. You're giving yourself a safe space to feel deeply, practice emotional recovery, and build tolerance for difficult emotions, all within a controlled, predictable framework. Here's the final insight that ties everything together. Neuroscience shows that context changes perception. You're literally not the same person who watched that show last year. Your brain has formed new neural connections, processed new experiences, developed different emotional baselines. When you rewatch with fresh eyes shaped by recent experiences, you're actually creating a novel experience from familiar material. The show stays the same, but the viewer transforms. This creates a unique psychological phenomenon, the comfort of familiarity combined with the stimulation of new interpretation. Research indicates this might be the optimal balance for the brain. Enough predictability to feel safe, enough novelty through your own evolution to stay engaged. It's not that rewatchers are stuck. They're sophisticated enough to extract new meaning from the same source material as they grow and change. So if you're someone who returns to the same shows and movies while others chase the newest releases, understand this. You're not being lazy, stuck, or unimaginative. You're engaging in sophisticated emotional regulation, building cognitive depth through layered consumption, maintaining psychological continuity with your past self, and creating safe spaces for emotional processing. These aren't quirks, they're signs of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Your brain has identified what works for it, what brings comfort without numbness, stimulation without overwhelm. If you found this valuable, subscribe for weekly psychology insights that help you understand the hidden wisdom in your everyday behaviors. Next week, we're exploring the psychology of people who need background noise to focus another misunderstood behavior that reveals something fascinating about the brain. Remember, the things that bring you comfort often reveal your greatest strengths.